I neglected last hour to mention something that's very important. My assistant this summer is Bailey Smith. She is really the one who makes all of this happen before we all get here and keeps things running very well while we are here. Bailey will be entering her sophomore year at Southern Utah University this fall. She is from Pullman, Washington, and an absolute, oh, you have some relatives here, or soon to be, right? Anyway, Bailey Smith, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name's Nancy Mielich, and I am here every morning of the season except Mondays. We are not here on Mondays, but we are here on Sundays and every other morning of the season. And I have audience members come up to me quite often and ask what shows we are talking about at that particular time. The 9 o'clock hour is reserved for talking about the shows that are on the outdoor Adams stage. The 10 o'clock hour reserved for talking about the shows that are on the Randall stage. So since it's a little bit after 10, we are here to talk today about Peter Schaffer's Amadeus that is currently on the Randall stage. How many of you have seen it already? Anyone here who has not? Okay, we've started, you folks know because you've been coming a lot of years, had a gentleman the other morning say that he'd gotten so much out of listening to the directors that he wished we would have the directors talk or the literary seminars prior to the performance. And that was when I said, it's perfectly fine for you to come to these before you see the shows. And he says, well, you need to promote that a little bit more. He thought you were only supposed to come here if you'd seen the shows. Not true. Come anytime. We like having you here anytime. So these literary seminars are sponsored in part by the generosity of Larry and Tina Howard and also the Utah Humanities. They are a funding source for this, and I like to thank them publicly. Also, a couple of other announcements. At 11 a.m. today, in the auditorium today, not the Randall, the auditorium theater, Jeff Leader, costume director, will be holding a costume seminar. There is no charge for that, and I hope you will all go to that at 11. And then tomorrow at 11 a.m. here in this spot will be an actor's seminar. So this gentleman sitting next to me, many of you know his work and certainly have welcomed him here over the years for 21 productions that he has directed here. J.R. Sullivan was also Associate Artistic Director here at the festival from 2002 to 2009. Then he went to New York City to run the Pearl Theater. J.R. is a Chicagoan and now has been called home to spend his artistic intelligence around that area, but also travels around the country as a director. J.R.'s work was last seen here in the fall in the production, the Sherlock Holmes production, The Final Adventure. His other productions here, 2 productions of Stones in His Pockets, numerous Shakespeare plays out on the Adams stage. J.R. is also a playwright and has adapted with Joe Hanratty Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility that premiered here last year, and also Pride and Prejudice. So welcome, J.R. Sullivan. Of course, those of you who saw Amadeus yesterday, I think I can safely say that show is going to be one that you are all going to embrace for the rest of your theater-going career. I think that it is, and I usually don't say this publicly, but I'm going to say it right now. I think it is an extraordinary production and has the touch of J.R. Sullivan written all over it with an exceptional cast and design team.
Thank you.
J.R. had told me previously when he was here that he had directed Amadeus 30 years ago at your theater, the theater that you ran in Chicago at that time. And I guess I wanted to start out with asking you the themes that Schaffer has included in this play about creativity, about jealousy, about your bargain with God. Are those themes still front and center for you as you direct in 2015 this show?
Yeah. Oh, yes, certainly. What we have in the script is a rewrite of the ending. Peter Shaffer was never fully satisfied with how the play concluded, feeling that a final confrontation between the two protagonists was necessary. If you remember, if you had seen it before, the original iterations of it had Salieri assuming the role of this messenger that goes to commission the Requiem, masked, as a device as a means to push Mozart over the edge, and very thrillingly, wickedly, melodramatically, he tore off the mask, or Mozart removed the mask from behind Salieri, saw that it was Antonio Salieri, and that was the last thing that pushed him over the edge into the abyss of madness. And the melodrama of that was undeniably great, but Shaffer felt that it wasn't right. It wasn't quite right, that it needed this actual confrontation of Salieri admitting, confessing, imparting what he had done to Mozart, what he had actually done, poisoning aside, but what he had done to block him in the world, what he had done to ruin him, take his living away, hasten his poverty and destitution, all of these things. And his hope, and so he kept working toward that. The film, if you recall, was different as well, with F. Murray Abraham sitting there taking dictation from a dying Mozart, so he could pass off the Requiem as his own, and that got thwarted by Constanza's early return. But in the late 90s, when the play was revived in London, and Peter Hall, the original director, staged it again, they went back to work on it with this idea of the brow-to-brow confrontation between the two, where Salieri would admit his wickedness, confess his wickedness, and ask for Mozart's forgiveness. And it was too late. Yeah, it affected the same thing, pushed Mozart into over the edge. I think it's a more satisfying play this way, certainly from my experience with it from before, and it takes it into humanistic tragedy because that imparts a knowledge of self, a full knowledge of self that Salieri experiences in that last scene.
And of course, it is fictitious. Much of it, as is stated at the end of the play, quoting from Beethoven, there was some, but not immediately when Mozart died. There was not. Constance didn't think that he had been poisoned by Salieri, and there was some comment about one of the sons saying, because Mozart's body was so bloated at the end, what was that caused from? But then the notes and Salieri, who did try to kill himself.
Yes, that's true. He did slit his throat. It did fail. Mediocre even in suicide. And he spent the last 2.5 years of his life in the city infirmary, and throughout that time was claiming and raving to anyone who would listen that he had killed Mozart, and that these things in the Beethoven conversation books, things that were written out for Beethoven because he couldn't hear, and the German Musical Times are all verbatim. Those are all things that appeared then. So,
okay, comments or questions from the audience? Yes. Okay.
So, as a lover of history, I've read a lot of what's existing of letters and things that Mozart had written, or correspondence with his sister and things. And I find it interesting how he was in fact quite as vulgar sexually and crudely as was portrayed. And I was curious last night, wondering how many people would hear that and think, why did they do that? Why are they having him say that? But in fact, that was exactly how he was. So, you know, that dynamic exploration of that polarity between the mastership musician and this very crude, you know, adolescent type childhood psyche is really amazingly portrayed.
Yeah, that's the thing. The very thing of we in the audience must experience exactly what Salieri does the first time he hears this, followed by the sublime beauty of the serenade, the adagio that he hears through the from the other room. And how can that music emanate from this crude and vulgar child?
Absolutely.
And that's that. And I think we must be taken aback by the things Mozart says. That's not nice. You know, there are children here. That's not nice, you know, but there's no flinching by Peter Schaffer on this. He does take, as you say, he does take that language directly from Mozart's own letters, and all of these other characters, his you know, the nicknames that he uses, and all those diminutives and such. And apparently, you know, Tasso Feldman, who does a lot of research, and he really steeped himself in all of these things. And I think he's rereading the letters now for the third or fourth time, and there are a lot of them. It just flows, you know, because of that research, and fulfills what it must in the play.
Yeah, the dynamic and the reality to it really came through. And the way you inserted the music, it was just so perfect. It was so, the music just grabs at your heart. I mean, you see them, and then you hear that, and it's a completion.
That music, it's tricky because there's so much music, and every time you hear a little bit of it, you want to hear all of it. But if we had done that, you'd probably still be sitting over there watching the play, listening to the play. But it is as much about this glorious music as well, and most of that is suggested by Schaffer, you know, as to what specific pieces should be heard. But the modulating of it, the where to come in with it, where to go out with it, all of that was our brilliant sound designer Barry Funderburg and working with me and figuring all that out. So it has a life of its own, and it should.
I don't know if you intended the deeper meaning that I kind of got out of that in Salieri trying to destroy Mozart. He actually destroyed himself.
This is the knowledge of self that he comes to. Yes,
and it says that anger and hatred and jealousy will destroy you.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's biblical, isn't it? Sin is waiting at the door, and its appetite is for you. It lets something in that is that eats him alive. That's corrosive. That he's not aware of it. You know, like
not at first.
Not at first. And it takes the events of the play to make it shockingly, searingly clear, you know, to him. It takes suffering of many kinds for wisdom and realization, including in villains.
A beautiful, beautiful performance. I'm a classical pianist, and I must ask Tasso and David Ivers, we were stage right. We were close to the piano, and I couldn't figure out if they were actually playing the piano. However, my mind said no to David Ivers, but I saw the keys going down and up. And the only reason I said no was because there were times when David was playing that it wouldn't have quite been the notes that he was reaching. So I must have this answered.
Should we take a vote? How many of you think David and Tasso are pianists? How many of you think that was an actual keyboard? I mean, a working keyboard.
It is it is a
Ben
created forte piano. The props department did outfit it with keys that do depress, although some of them don't depress very well at all. and some better than others. But you know, with the technology that's now available to us, it's tricky, you know, because I mean, a production would be fortunate to have, you know, a couple of actors that could, who are. I mean, Salieri was regarded as a great composer in his time, and of course, Mozart, a virtuoso of the keyboard. So they can't just play; they've got to play great. But you know, there's a wireless speaker installed in the box of the Forte, and it's aided and abetted by other speakers around and about. And but they need to be convincingly have their digits on the keys, you know, because there are pianists in the audience.
So my words to the two actors, possibly, and the director would be to make it look, which again, it confused me, would just be to get a little bit more of this movement instead of this movement.
That's good. Good. Yes, I think you're right. You know, it's a little bit up and down right now, and not a little flow. But now they've opened, I think a little flow will start to happen. Yeah.
Two questions. One, is it written in the script that the costume changes happen, or with, especially with David Ivers and how he does that, or is that more your direction?
Well, they have the way the script is set up. As far as Salieri is concerned, it has to happen on stage. It has to happen. He only leaves the stage once in the play, and it's something we let him do, so you get a glass of water. And that's not till the middle of the second act, and that's for 20 seconds or less. So, but it's a convention that I find audiences readily accept. The play, it takes place entirely in it starts in 1823 and then does a jump, kind of shiftily enough, you know, to 1825 for the ending. So it's already a theatrical construct, and he with the setting being done as a Baroque theater, Salieri is in effect saying to us we ghosts, you know, of the future, this we audience for him, that I'm going to present the theater, the performance of my life, in the literal sense of what happened to me, set up as an actor in a sense. You know, I will do it myself. And so any changes that happen on stage, it's the servants too that have to go back and forth between 1781 and 1823 to keep us our feet in the right time period. But it's a theatrical convention that allows the play to happen swiftly, which a script of that length must do.
The other question was the laugh. Is it documented with him, or is that just a contrivance that happens?
That's something we don't know, but that's something we know sure works. And in fact, it threads its way into the text of the play when it's Salieri and when he goes over the edge, I think, and to a certain degree of madness, when he imitates the laugh himself and calls it not the laughter of Mozart, but God, the laughter of God, and at him. So, and, you know, there's a rock star aspect to Wolfgang, you know, that you know, enters and takes over the room and is unrestrained, you know, and uninhibited and impulsive and all the rest. And that is in accord, as we heard, you know, with the letters and the personality and what is reported about him.
There's also a kind of a Liberace aspect to him too, with that.
Especially that chandelier over his head, right?
And his costumes.
Hold the mic very close, please.
Okay, all
This
the
way.
glitter on his costumes. That he really was out to have everybody see him.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. He was, and I think it's true that they were especially with too much optimism about success in the future. And why wouldn't he think that, given the childhood success that he had and being declared a chevalier by the Pope when he was 14, and all the gifts he'd received from all the royal houses and families of Europe. And he comes to Vienna, the music capital, and already with a commission from the emperor in his pocket, that they ran up the credit card, and were profligate that way, and then it all turned around. So
I was wondering if Salieri was known for knocking people's wigs off, or was that just an accident?
Oh, that was well, he knocks his own off, and that's our intention. But an errant button on his coat caught Bono as he leaned back. It was just one of those things that seemed to happen at first performances. You know, I mean, I've gone through so many of them in my life. I never know what it's going to be, but I know it's something. And my memoir will be called "Things That Happened to Me at Opening Days" and Opening Nights. I was glad Chuck didn't put it back on. That's what I was worried about. But he just sort of held it like a little Shih Tzu in his arms.
Right. That's what it looked like, a little dog.
This kind of just struck me. I think it's really interesting. If we look at a lot of the shows this year, there are relationships between fathers and sons that are really front and center. You know, certainly Henry IV Part 2 and Lear. And I can see, I mean, I think the father image in this, of course, the obvious one is Mozart's father, that he had a very love-hate relationship with. I think that's so interesting when the father dies that Mozart just falls apart. You know,
Yes.
here's a man who controlled him completely, but now that he's gone, Mozart feels he's totally vulnerable, doesn't have any protection. And I
Yes.
see Salieri as a kind of a diabolical father figure to Mozart as well. You know, he should take him under his wing as a protege and help him, and yet he turns that. So there's some really interesting father-son dynamic in here, I think.
Yes, I often find that that's the beauty of a theater season, and then for you, a season that's all in, you know, at once. And these connections between great plays begin to reveal themselves, and I think that's quite true about fathers. Certainly, history plays are all about that. You know, the father, the son, or the surrogate father in the case of Falstaff. But quite true that or Lear and his daughters here. So I think that's a connection that's very apt, very, very true, and one that is experienced in the immediate with all of these plays at once, as opposed to over a theater season. But this often happens, you know, when artistic, you know, currents of thought and issues coalesce, and there's a coherence between the plays, and the plays talk to each other.
Charlie's aunt, fathers and sons in that. And as you mentioned, Lear, we always think of the father and the daughters in Lear. There's certainly that parallel story with Gloucester and his bastard son, Edwin and Edward. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I approached this performance with the attitude that the principal actor had a lot of work to do to overcome F. Murray Abraham. He succeeded marvelously. I was just blown away by his performance, and I'm just very grateful to have seen it. My wife was equally stunned, really, by the performance. In fact, we thought there was too much laughter in the audience because we were just, some of the comedy routines didn't seem comedic in the whole power of the performance. And as I saw it, there was a real strong dimension of creativity in the midst of as a play between spontaneity on Mozart's part and control on Salieri's part, and it fell way on the spontaneity as the way to successful creativity. Could you just say a little bit about that?
Well, yes, Salieri is again. There are recordings of his that you can get, and you won't be appalled. You know, he is in the strictest sense, he is a Baroque classical musician. He's tone deaf to dissonance and chromaticism. That's the part that he talks about, the pain, you know, which is an exquisite pain, because A, what is the sound? I don't know this. And B, it is sublime and transporting. And he's in this dilemma of being rapturous about the music and hating the man that created it. So he goes back and forth between the extraordinary, transcendent beauty of the sound, which was unfailingly so. You know, one of Mozart's profound achievements beyond writing 630 plus pieces in a lifetime that only lasted till the age of 35, was that he succeeded across the board in almost every musical genre that existed at the time.
The dynamic was it just seems to me that the dynamic was he was absolutely sure he'd done every possible thing he could. Kind of reminded me of the elder brother and the prodigal son in that dynamic.
Yeah, well, as far as the literary form, this is as old as the Old Testament. This is as old as Genesis. I mean, Cain and Abel, Saul and David. You know, why is my gift not acceptable? No answer beyond some sort of oblique, ironic, get over it kind of thing, you know, from the Almighty, which engenders anger. And that's the profound basic question at the bottom of all this. What is up with that? Why Antonio Salieri is a pious man of rectitude, order, charitable in his time, does everything right. And as he says, you know, what goodness is nothing in the furnace of art. Was Mozart good? You know, Richard Wagner was a deeply horrible man. It does not take away from the virtue of his music. So that's a premise of human experience, you know, for us to kind of ponder, as we consider our own relationship to each other and God, if you will. What is the nature of that? These are profound questions, and as the creations of the Almighty, we have a right to ask, I think.
Hi, I have the mic. I'm way in the back over here, and I am a costumer at UVU, but I noticed that Mozart was wearing either his natural hair or a brown wig, and I know that's a significant choice, and I was just wondering about your thoughts on that. I didn't write it down, so I can't remember the timing of when that transition
beginning
happened.
of Act 2, and after the Liberace-like stuff in Act 1. It comes from Schaffer. He suggests that it's a natural looking wig that but a wig that Mozart is wearing, but the color of his own hair and tied back very simply. And I think for him it corresponds to the humbling that Mozart is going through at that point.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, and I really, really liked that a lot.
Also would be less expensive for them.
Yes, definitely less expensive. The other thing that I really liked that really touched me was I love Mozart. I don't know that much about him. I know the basics of the story, but I didn't realize that he performed the magic flute in the theater that he did for the people that he did, or the symbolism with the Masons, which I really thought was neat, because that's my favorite opera of his. And so for me, that really struck a chord that it was, and then their little nicknames for each other for the Papageno, you know, those things.
That's right.
Was so cool. I really, really enjoyed that a lot.
It was a depiction of how Mozart just used everything from, as Salieri says, everything from his ordinary life he turned into, you know, legendary work.
Yeah.
Whereas Salieri says, and I from legends could only create the ordinary. And that was his torment that he had to end.
Yeah. And I can't remember the exact line, but something about how, if I'm right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but where gods in the audience, watching them. Do you remember that part?
Yes,
I
that's
love
a very
that line
yeah.
as well.
So there's a capital A for audience in this text as Mozart talks about that, and it's really you know, a Zen-like sort of depiction of truth being a shared spirit among all people. That we are in fact in that position if the music as God's art, as Salieri calls it, transcends to such an extent that we are transported to something sublime and insights that are divine. And we've all had that experience at some time or other with art, be it, you know, music or, you know, painting, sculpture. You know, there's appreciation, but sometimes there's something that just, you can feel the energy, you know, at the heart when you're present to it, not at some reproduction of it. And that is an avenue to understanding and perception and potentially transcendence that we live for.
And I think if you ask David Hawkins, he will definitely say that there is a resonance to different paintings, you know, music, stuff that elevates our own or lowers our own resonance. And we sense this, although we don't have, you know, a meter to measure it ourselves, that it definitely does that. I was interested, something that had never dawned on me this last year that I studied. You know, God continued to converse with Cain after he had killed Abel. So I have lost my problem with God communicating with people of lesser virtue than I am.
Well, it's all his creation. Yeah.
So I was, from a historical perspective, and in modern days, we have social media and ways of promoting ourselves. And back then, obviously, Mozart was not able to successfully promote his own works, even though he had several commissioned works and they were presented and they were very successful. But somehow, Salieri was able to suppress that. And how did they do that back in that historical context?
Well, how does it happen in corporations today? Or any construct of bureaucratic nature, where there are people at the gates that you have to get their nod in order to promote and pass through. Sometimes this is corrupt. Sometimes this is not based on justice and fairness. And sometimes it's perverse, and I think it's a human condition as well, you know, in institutions. And it was certainly shockingly and tragically used against Mozart because the people that were in a position to help him didn't like him personally, found him offensive. I'll fix you. So there it is, as Joseph II says.
There it is. There you have it. Yeah.
Have you ever worked with a cast with Betsy and Tazo's energy before?
Well, yes, thankfully, for plays that require it, but thank goodness for them, you know, and this play. I mean, his energy, you know, needs to be just of another dimension, you know, which explains a little bit about how, you know, he stays up all night for days at a time, you know, finishes The Marriage of Figaro in 6 weeks, a historic fact. And this legend about him having music completely composed in his head, you know, well, we don't really know about that. There are some corrections on some extant pieces, but the volume of things that he was able to produce so quickly. I mean, Marriage of Figaro is an exquisite piece of work, arguably the greatest opera written. He's right about that.
How much channeling of Tazo's and Betsy's energy did you have to do in order to get the effect that you wanted?
Well, you create an environment for actors of that caliber to go for it. That starts in the rehearsal room. You create a safe place for them to try a lot and to try it early and to find how that one energy feeds the other and goes from there. They have to start the play at the highest possible energy, with that mouse cat, game that happens in the library.
Well, kudos to
They are
the
great,
effect
aren't they? They are absolutely
that they
great.
created through you. I was thoroughly enjoyed that.
I am their fortunate and happy collaborator.
Well, there are moments in everybody's life when you wish that you had done something differently, and the moment is gone, you can never redo it again. But last night was one for me when at the end of Amadeus, or yesterday afternoon, I guess, at the end of Amadeus, David Ivers got the standing ovation, which I think it was very well deserved. But Tasso Feldman came out just before him, and I thought, oh, I wish I had stood up for him because I thought that he also did a marvelous performance. So relay that to him.
Sure will.
Nancy, you look like you wanted me to say something last hour. I'll remind the audience that this is my very first exposure to Shakespeare, other than what I hated in The Merchants of Venice in high school. And I've hated ever since. And then I watched the movie Amadeus, and I turned it off halfway through. I thought it was just vulgar. And my hatred for Shakespeare grew. So then my sister here drug me along this week for my first exposure. And after the last two plays that I've seen, I'm just totally aghast, totally surprised at the humor and the laughter involved, which I never knew existed. So thank you.
Thank you for being here. And thank you for being, as I said yesterday, when you announced that you had never seen a Shakespeare play and the audience was thrilled. I could tell they were thrilled. They applauded you. I thank you for speaking up again, and particularly for your comments that you're enjoying yourself. I think you should get an honorary membership for comment over here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Last night I was really intrigued that Salieri came through because of Ivers' facial expressions. Now, is that him or the director or both?
Well, of course that's him. I mean, there are things that I tell him what I'm seeing, which is a way of checking his thinking moment to moment. And of course, stage acting, which is largely the text and rhythms of the text, different. I mean, F. Murray Abraham in the role, for instance, volumes of performance of that performance was felt through his eyes, and that's film acting is largely about what's going on behind the eyes, because the camera can go right there and we know what an actor's thinking. So those wonderful moments for Abraham in the film where he has to be present to, the latest outrage from Mozart, or when he was listening to the music all alone in his theater box and just overwhelmed by the rapture of it. That's a whole different thing for David and this play and any of the actors, and he's addressing you the entire play. You're a character in the play. That his connection to an audience is text plus, how rhythmically he's punctuating that and buttoning that with what he does with expression. And he's down center most of the time and right there. And that was a key thing. But David is gifted in this. He's a profoundly accomplished comic actor, which gives him a deep, connected sense to the audience's presence, how they are with him or not, where he needs to take them, and how he does that physically as well as with language. So, and that's why I like to work with actors who are great with comedy in serious plays, because they have that instinctive, intuitive sense of rhythm, and the audience is breathing with them all the time. And I find that to be very, very useful if you're doing Hamlet or King Lear or Amadeus.
So David's also a director. Do you find it hard, and a lot of
actors also direct and directors also act. Do you find it hard when you have to work with an actor that's also a director?
Who knows better than me? No, I fire them. Really, in this case, in David's case, his directing hat, he just parks at the door. There was, and any actor that does directing or vice versa, they know the role, and embrace that, and I've never really experienced that as a problem. Thank goodness, though. I think it can exist. I'm sure it has happened, but fortunately, it hasn't occurred to me yet.
So one thing I picked up from this production that I think kind of was surprising, because hadn't seen the production before, but I'd seen the movie several times and in love with it, was the whole idea of him feeling like he is better in God's eyes than Mozart, and so why isn't he blessed? And so that kind of resonated, because I've been around people who are very pious and oh, I'm so much better than what you are, or judgmental. And
well, pride, of course, is a sin too, and it comes into that.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting, and the whole mediocrity thing, the speech at the end, I just thought was marvelous.
But one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting with this was, even in his sense that he was the only one who got it. I mean, there was something he had to be best at, and he was the only one who truly knew how great Mozart was. I thought that was interesting. I mean, there was something that he found that he was best at, which was appreciation of somebody he hated.
A pair of ears, as he says.
I have to laugh because a week or so ago, one of my boys told me that I don't exactly know where this experience comes from, but there were a couple of missionaries, and the one missionary thought that he was so much better than the other missionary, and he got this little message from God. I feel the same about both of you.
This is kind of a logistical comment, but do you guys have contingency plans for David remaining at this level of energy and everything else, directing? I know he's not physically directing Charlie's Aunt from now on, but Salieri is such an enormous undertaking for him, and he has at least 12 other jobs. Is he going to be able to, are you going to be able to support him through it the whole season?
I will be supporting him avidly and energetically all the way from Chicago, yes. And I think, too, that, I mean, actually, it is an extraordinary load he's carried, early on. I mean, just Salieri alone, would have been, more than enough. And the great actors of the world, Paul Scofield, was the first Salieri. Ian McKellen, played him in New York. But, things should start to even out a little bit for him now that the shows are opened. He'll have Amadeus 4 times a week, not every day. That's a blessing. And of course, he's, as a director, you move into a monitoring sort of role, once the plays are open, and the actual maintenance of them are in the hands of the very able stage managers here. So I think now that we've gotten over the barrier of the opening, blessedly for him, his energies will begin to find a rhythm of their own. Yeah, the last couple of weeks were the critical ones, really, because he had his issues with Charlie's Aunt, as well as knowing that he, was on his shoulders for Amadeus.
The audience also might find it interesting in what your connection will be now with the stage manager. If something she sees is changing, she'll still
We get
still be in-
reports after every performance that details, how the running time, which always tells you a lot. And I like to get the running time, certain scenes, which will tell me about the dynamism of the event. Then things, as they get comfortable, things will develop. The plays are meant to be set and grooved in such a way that they've now found their channel, and that channel just will now deepen in meaning and effectiveness. But if any inspirations show up in the rehearsal report that seem to be out of whack, I'll communicate my thoughts about that too. But that rarely happens. I mean, I think we trust each other and respect each other, and that's at the heart of the collaboration. It's a deep trust and a deep love. So the responsibility of the performance is carried forth by people that care about its integrity. I'm not concerned about that.
Excuse me, other people have touched on this, but I just wanted to ask you a question about Schaeffer's writing. Your interpretation made it so clear, clearer than I've ever seen it, about the nature of retribution and God's retribution, and how that plays out not as thunderbolts or any kind of direct relationship, but a wave, more or less. And I wanted to find out how you looked at that and touched on that, because as I said, this production to me was clearer than I've ever seen it.
Well, for me, God's nature is a mystery and must always be so. That's an unknowable thing. We have stories that we tell each other. Was that the Holy Spirit? I'll be speaking in tongues from this point on. That's a mystery, but to me, it's what I could focus on, and what we did, and what I think Schaeffer does too, is with this profoundly disturbing story about what human beings are capable of doing to other human beings. With Salieri at the wicked center of it all, first to see his decline into that and the reasons for it, and how it develops even beyond his own control, even without his own full understanding until the end, like Lear, until he comes to understand it and then comes to know himself. That's the story that we can, as fellow humans, we can invest in and tell. And as for the mystery, that will remain so, and we'll continue to speculate on that.
Okay, we're almost at the end of the hour, but I wanted to ask JR to tell us, since so many of you who have been here previously know his work, and we're so enamored of the Pride and Prejudice adaptation that he and Johann Reddy did, and Sense and Sensibility last year. Can you tell us where they are now and where this audience can go to see them?
Well, if you're in Spring Green, Wisconsin this summer, Pride and Prejudice is playing there, just opened. And it's had a whole lot of high school productions up and down the West Coast. When Oregon Shakespeare Festival did it in 2010, same year as here, that was a great platform for every high school teacher in California and Oregon and Washington. And of course, Jane Austen's stories are very high school drama department friendly, because there are a lot of parts for women and a few for a couple of guys. So as Sense and Sensibility is getting a production this fall in Sacramento. Next spring at People's Light outside of Philadelphia.
With some of your same actors.
Cassie Bissell will be in that. Sam Ashdown will be in that. Joe is going to direct that one as well. It's going to be at the PCPA in Solvang in California next summer. Connecticut Rep this fall at some point. So
have you done have you changed anything from when it was here?
We've tightened it up a little bit, but not much. We got it done. Plays like Amadeus teach us how to deal with these big things. And the swift set changes and hardworking servant core, and all the rest, is a big part of that. So our attitude is it can always be shorter, and we're always looking for ways to do that. But it's getting to be in final form right now.
We had a patron last summer who said they wanted your Sense and Sensibility to be longer. It was too short.
Well,
so that's.
I
a
have one
compliment.
question about the festival itself.
Where are you?
I'm right here. I'm used to having 2 different performances in the afternoon and 2 different ones at night, but that's not happening now. Is that because of the transition to the new places that the Adams Theater last?
No, I think it is all the same, except we don't have a performance on Monday nights. But the scheduling does change. They do that isn't the same play every Tuesday night or Wednesday night. If you look at the schedule again, I think you'll see that that scheduling has not changed. Other than we don't have a show in the Randall on Monday night this season.
Okay, all right. And also, wasn't the season starting in June before?
Yeah, maybe just
A
a little
couple
bit
of
later.
years ago.
Yes, a little bit later. I think
Yeah.
it started the 24th of June last year, and this year the 27th. So,
okay.
So not too different.
All right.
Okay, J.R. Sullivan.
Labor Day kind of determines it, because it backs off. This comes from my days of being in administration here. It backs in weeks from Labor Day. So if Labor Day is later, the season will start a little later.
All right, J.R. Sullivan, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you to all of you. The costume seminar is beginning right now in the Auditorium Theater, and I'll be back tomorrow morning with the directors of today's shows.
Cushions for me? Well, I would have left it. I'll put this up front. Yeah. They're to promote what?
Seat cushion sales.
Oh, yes.
And it's working.
Yeah.
Thank you. Here's all these things.
Nancy, I wanted to ask you a question.
Yes,
What
sir.
are the plans for the property where the Adams is now?
That's completely up to Southern University because it owns the property. And what I have declared is that the theater will be there for a while, and then eventually they plan to tear down the auditorium and build a whole new performing arts center there for the university. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I think it's always about money, right? I mean, when they have money. But I think it's going to come down. It's going to come down for sure at some point.
Because we enjoy the patio there so much.
I know.
To see
I know.
that
There will be something like that. Change is hard, right?
It is. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Hey. They were here for yeah, right. Oh. So they can work together. He said, why don't you stop finish your house? I was like, we can go out. So good. Okay, well then we'll do something. Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah, I'll call Susan. Yeah. I don't know why. Yeah, I think what it needs is fresh blood. I mean, I think having Cynthia direct it's really a problem because now it's more temporary than ever. Oh, everyone thinks it's better. Ellen and I sat there, like 6 hours. So, but I think Ellen and I should write because I threw out, she had me do the first program and then she filled it, what she filled in. That's why nobody, she wasn't even going to take my report. I said, no, you've really done really good job adding. The